This week on Engage the Sage.
Hi, everyone. I'm Don Saucier. Welcome to this week's episode of Engage the Sage. This week, we're going to talk about how to send emails. Because with the pandemic going on, especially with all of the online and remote modalities that we're using in our teaching, a lot of the conversations that we have with our students happen over email. And sometimes those communications go well, and sometimes those go less well. I'm willing to bet that some of you get frustrated by some of the emails you get from your students. Maybe they're not using the appropriate title. Maybe they're using text acronyms like LOL and JK and IDK. And I'm not even 100% sure why an email to me would have LOL in it. Maybe sometimes you get an email from a student and you're not even sure from that email why that email is coming to you. You're not even sure if they're in your class. While we get these emails, I think it's important that we understand that we can decide to be frustrated or we can decide to do something about it. So rather than getting offended about the emails that we get from students, I think we can use this as a teachable moment. Emails are really interesting in that we get no nonverbal cues that go along with them. There's lots of opportunities for misunderstanding. And I think with a little bit of guidance, what we can do is create more effective communication in the emails, not only that we get from our students, but the emails that we send to our students. One of the guidelines that I try to stick to in the classes that I teach is that I don't expect my students to know things that I haven't taught them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach them how to send emails to me. And what we're going to do in this week's video is provide guidelines that you can use to teach your students how to send emails to you. And if you want, you can even just have them watch this video. So these are some of the guidelines that I suggest that we teach our students to sending effective emails to us in our classes. One of the things I tell my students is put the class name and number in the subject line of the email. If you're in my general psychology class, my Psych 110 class, put that in the subject line of the email. That's going to let me know right away what to think about in terms of opening that email and reading that email. Because I teach a lot of classes. And if you don't tell me what class you're in, it's going to be hard for me to find the context for the question you might be asking. I recommend that my students use a greeting and my name to start out their email. So dear, hello, or hi are all fine greetings to use. And then in my classes, I'll let them know how it is they should address me. So let them know you can call me Don. I have no problem with using my first name. But if you want to use the title, use professor or doctor. So say, hi, Dr. Saucier, hello, Professor Saucier, or hi, Don. All of those would be fine. But I let them know how it is I want them to call me, because one of the things that I found is that sometimes students will call me Mr. Saucier. I don't like to be called Mr. Saucier. I don't think that's really befitting the education that I have. However, I'm also quite sure that I called some of my professors Mr. and Ms. when I was a first year college student, because I didn't know any better, and that's what I called my teachers in high school. So one of the things that I try to do is let my students know what the appropriate ways to address the people teaching their classes are. And I also let them know that it's always better to promote somebody. So call somebody doctor or professor, even if they shouldn't be called doctor or professor, and then they can let you know what they'd rather be called as a follow-up. I think that's better than shooting to something less formal like Mr. or Ms. or even using their first name before you've been given permission to do so. So now that we've made sure that it's the right class and the right person, now one of the things I tell my students to do is to use real sentences with actual punctuation. I realize this isn't always how we talk in our text messages, but it helps me understand the clarity of the message. So not just being the grumpy old guy here saying, in my day we used periods and question marks. What I'm trying to do is make sure that I'm getting the clarity of the email correct. I want to know what that email is telling me. And punctuation helps with that. I also tell my students that if you want a reply from me, ask a question in your email. So let me know what it is you want. Don't just tell me you're going to be missing class. Say, I'm going to miss in class. Did I miss a quiz? I'm going to be missing class. Should I get the notes from a classmate? These are the kinds of questions that I now know how to reply. Otherwise, I might interpret that email as just being information for me and then file it. And then students are concerned I didn't actually get their email. So by asking me a question, it lets me know how to reply. And then the student is getting the information that he, she, or they wants. And then in closing the email, I'll tell my students, use the name you want me to call you. So that way I'm not gonna call you something you don't want to be called. Maybe you don't like your first name. Maybe you don't like your full name. Maybe there's a nickname that you like. Maybe your name is a dead name and you'd rather use a different name. Close with the email that you would like me to use, and I'll try really hard to use that name in talking to you. One of the other guidelines I offer to my students is keep the email as short as it can appropriately be in making your point. So that way I'm not going to get lost in terms of what you need from me in my reply. And one thing I think it's important that we do is we should invite these email messages from our students. We should let our students know early and often in our classes that if they have questions, if they need guidance, if they would like information from us, they should send us that email. So letting them know we want that email and how to send it shows us that we are there for them. It's demonstrating that caring that's so important to bringing peace to the classes that we teach. All right. So now that we have some guidelines for the emails that our students are going to send to us, I think there are also some guidelines about the emails that we should be sending to our students. One of the first things to keep in mind is that it's really hard for us to promote their being professional in their emails to us without us being professional back. So I think we're going to model a lot of the same guidelines that we've just suggested that our students use in emails to us. I think we all should use a greeting, and I think we should use our students' preferred names when we reply to our emails. I think we should thank them for sending us the message. It's scary to email instructors. This is something that students don't feel necessarily confident in doing. And they may be kind of risking a lot or perceiving that they're risking a lot in sending us an email. So thank them for the message that you got from them and mean that. I think you should keep your response to an email to a student as short as it can appropriately be. You want to let the student know that you care about that, but you don't want to write them a lot of text where it's hard for them to actually find the answer to the question that they were asking you. And to the extent that you can, use paragraph breaks so that they can keep that straight. They don't want to read this one long, massive text. These shorter paragraphs that are getting maybe a couple of questions that they have are going to be a lot easier to avoid the miscommunications that emails are really easy to include. I really recommend not just sending a grumpy answer back about the answer to their question being in the syllabus. I think, and we've done this in another video, I think the syllabus is a very powerful tool and it's a great place to have information. And I think you definitely should empower your students to find that information in the syllabus moving forward. But I also think answering their question is showing caring at that point. And I think caring and kindness and understanding and empathy are things that we need in teaching. I also recommend that we let them know how quickly it is we're going to reply to their emails. So for me, 24 to 48 hours might be kind of reasonable. Let my students know that. And if you haven't heard from me within about 48 hours, feel free to resend your email. But sending it, 2 hours after you sent it or 4 hours after, that might be a little bit too much to expect. And I think letting our students know how they can expect to hear from us is important. It sets the norms for our communication. By the same token, I don't usually send emails at night to my students because I don't want them to expect to hear from me at 10 p.m. because that's not normally a time that I'm going to be able to send those emails. So I might send an email the next morning. So letting our students know what they can expect in terms of replies from us, I think is also going to help them be less stressed about these email communications. And it's going to make the norms in our class easier to adhere to. When you're closing your email, one of the things that I recommend is use the name you want them to call you. So at the end of my emails, I'll typically sign it off with Don because I'm comfortable with my students using my first name. And if you're not, that's completely, totally fine. If you'd rather be called by your title, then sign your email with Dr. Saucier or Professor Saucier, if you're me, obviously. So let them know what it is you want them to call you. I also encourage that we end our emails with an invitation to follow up with more questions if they have them, because it might be the case that you misunderstood that student's question. Email is a really easy medium for misunderstandings. And if you misunderstood their question and gave them an answer that wasn't that informative, that student might feel really kind of hesitant about reaching back out unless you've invited them to do so. So what we've just done is we've discussed a lot of guidelines that you could potentially share with your students to increase the effectiveness of the emails that they send to you, and to also maybe increase the effectiveness of the emails that you send to them. I highly invite you to have your students watch this video. If you're concerned about the emails that you've been getting, you don't have to be the person to teach them. We'll teach them for you. You can share this video as long as you agree with those guidelines. And if not, come up with your own guidelines, because I think if we're getting emails from our students that are not that effective, it's our job to teach them how to communicate professionally with us. I would love to see in the comment any tips that you have about how you teach your students to send you effective emails, and tips that you have for all of us in teaching faculty to send emails to our students to increase effective communication, as we're doing so much of this communication online and remotely. I'd also love to see in the comments you putting in any of those funny emails that you've received from your students. One of my favorites is one of my students didn't call me Don, didn't call me Professor Saucier, didn't call me Dr. Saucier, just went to Donnie Boy. Thank you for joining us this week on Engage the Sage. Please like, subscribe, sign up for notifications, share us on social media, and show this video to your students. We look forward to seeing you next time on Engage the Sage.